evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another thought-provoking episode of Think About It Thursday. I'm your host with the most, G. Lacey. In tonight's episode, we're going to talk about Queen Elizabeth. Long live the Queen. We're going to discuss the current reigning monarchy and the wonders of England. Excuse me, I don't know how to say their last name. Why do you think the Windsors? Yep. Why do you think the Queen still is recognized as the Queen all over the world? Anybody want to jump in?
Because she was classy and she represented power with poise. She was one. She was a symbol of strength for women. That's another reason why.
Anybody else?
Right. She was well respected, like David said. It's kind of like how we still call Mom's house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah, the queen, she was really just a figurehead. That's all the royal family is, a figurehead. They do a lot of charity work and throughout over in their country. Over in their country, Scotland, all those European countries over there, they, go around because they're figureheads to most of those countries.
I think they may have gave her more respect though than just being a paper figure, because I think that people really recognized her as royalty. Like I said, she is a long-standing staple of that of that monarchy and what it represents. I think she represented the power that, I would even take it so far as say like Camelot, more like that legendary royal blood, that type of stuff, like King Arthur and stuff. That's how they treated her. Like she was like a legend like that.
She's definitely a legend for sure. She's definitely a legend. She represented
stability. She represented independence. She was a boss woman in the man's world.
That's right.
Yeah, that's definitely.
Well, let me tell you, this has a lot to do with Britain's imperial history. 16 countries, including Canada, Australia, and technically, they're all royal subjects to the British monarchy, which once ruled much of the world. What is the monarchy? Y'all know what a monarchy is?
That's the ruling state.
State, yeah, head of a country.
A monarchy is a political system in which a supreme authority is vested in a monarch. An individual ruler who functions as the head of state. It typically acts as a political administration organization and a social group of nobility known as the court society. It's a form of government, and their focus is loyalty and service. Do you think a monarchy should rule another country that isn't there?
Really. They're not really ruling. They they speak to because just like how we were, America was under England's control, and the Pearl, when they dumped the tea in the
Boston tea
harbor.
Yeah, that's why we need the revolution for that,
Right. So what they are over to those other countries that they travel frequently, they help in raising money for them for one, but they also want them to live like England, they under the England rules and stuff like that.
Yeah, so they basically rule over the country.
Yeah, I think there's benefits to that. I mean, and like back in the medieval times, the stories that they speak of, to the victor goes the spoils. So if you, like any victory, you know, you get to do what you want as the people that you conquered. The conqueror gets to basically rule that land. So yeah, that's what comes with winning.
So you think that they should be able to rule other countries that isn't theirs, actually? Like people should bow to them. And
what I understand is that the people of those countries take a vote to see if they want to be under the monarchy. Because that's what's going on right now. You got certain countries that's willing to put a vote to put it up for voting again if they want to stay under England, or if they want to become a republic, like the United States.
See, it's already started. The queen has not even, her grave ain't even warmed over yet. Her body's still cold, stiff.
She ain't getting buried until next week anyway.
And it's already starting. These questions that were not even questions when she was of the living. You didn't dare question her ability to rule or her status. There wasn't these questions being
actually it was.
It is. I think it was.
But they voted to stay under England.
They know better. They knew what came with defying the queen. You know, that lady, she had a rigid look to her, and I'm pretty sure they know that what comes with dealing with her to defy her.
So do you think now that she's gone that there's going to be countries deciding against that or in the state underneath her?
Because King Charles is in control now.
Well,
yeah, I don't think people look at him that way.
Barbados and the Bahamas is a couple of other ones that are wanting to put a vote up.
We're gonna get into that, Sonia.
The Virgin Islands, there's two Virgin Islands. There's the Virgin Island of the United States and Virgin Island of Great Britain.
Well,
right now at this time, since she's gone, the Black community, they want their land and their mules, their anchors that they're old now.
I think we're gonna dive into all of the things that y'all are talking about a little bit into the conversation. But here's the first clip on a so-called royal subject's opinion.
First time I was on television was back in 2002 when I was 18. The topic was Queen Elizabeth. You see, my country, Canada, is one of 15 where Queen Elizabeth is the head of state, and I don't like having Queen Elizabeth as head of state of Canada, so they had me on to debate this other guy who thinks having Queen Elizabeth as head of state of Canada is really great. It is very painful for me to watch this video today because I look and sound so horrible, but let's just take a quick glimpse. It's just irrelevant to today's society. That's enough. Anyway, let's talk about this whole crazy head of state situation in more detail. So, back in the day, there was this thing called the British Empire, and it controlled half the world. Some of the empire's colonies were full of white immigrants from Britain, and after a while, the people in the white colonies wanted to have their own government and run their own affairs. But Britain said no. And then America staged a revolution and left the empire, and Britain said, let's talk. After many years of negotiation, in 1931, Britain's 6 white colonies, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Newfoundland, and Ireland, came up with an arrangement to become completely politically independent while still retaining one important link to Great Britain. The idea was that even after these countries became independent, the British monarch would still be at the top of their political pyramid. The British monarch would hold the office of head of state, or most symbolically important political person. But get this, the monarch would also treat each country as its own little separate kingdom. When Elizabeth II was made Queen of Great Britain in 1952, this arrangement was made very explicit. After she was named Queen of England, she was also named Queen of Canada, and Queen of Australia, and Queen of New Zealand, and Queen of South Africa. Newfoundland had by this time joined Canada, and Ireland had opted out altogether. So the British thought that this was a very cool setup because it allowed them to pretend like they still had an empire without all of the hassle of actually running one. Because of course the British royal family had no actual power by this time. And when Britain made its other colonies independent in the 50s and 60s and 70s, it made those newly independent countries follow this whole system too. Pretty soon Queen Elizabeth was Queen of Ghana, and Queen of Nigeria, and Queen of Jamaica, and Queen of Fiji, and all these other exciting places. The British thought this was awesome. Their queen was still queen of half the world, and they didn't even have to do anything. Unfortunately, a lot of the countries themselves did not like this. They thought, hey, I thought we were supposed to be independent of Britain, so why is this British lady still running around claiming to be our queen? Over the course of the next 35 years, 15 of these former British colonies changed their constitutions to strip Elizabeth II of her title as their queen. Today there are only 15 countries left that still recognize the British queen as being their queen, or in other words, as being their head of state. 8 of them are in the Caribbean: Jamaica, Bahamas, Barbados, Antigua and Barbuda, Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. 3 are in the South Pacific: Tuvalu, Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands. And 3 are left over from the original clique that started it all: Australia, New Zealand, and good old Canada. Oh yeah, and Belize in Latin America. Now you are probably thinking, aha, I know exactly what that weirdo with the mustache is talking about. He is talking about the Commonwealth. Well, you are wrong. For you see, the Commonwealth is just this generic make the world better non-governmental organization that some former British colonies belong to, but some non-former British colonies belong to as well. Members of the Commonwealth have all sorts of different political systems, and only a tiny minority do the whole recognize the British Queen as their queen thing. It is true that Queen Elizabeth is the honorary chairperson of the Commonwealth, but this is like being the honorary chairperson of NATO or something. Who cares? Countries that recognize the British Queen as their queen were originally called dominions, but then that term fell out of favor, so now they're usually called Commonwealth realms. Which is sort of a confusing name because, as I said, not all members of the Commonwealth are Commonwealth realms. And to this day, we in the surviving Commonwealth realms are still having a debate as to whether or not it is appropriate for an independent country to have the British Queen as head of state. Here in Canada, they even put twerpy weirdos on TV to talk about it. What do you think? Does this seem normal to you? Let me know in the comments. Perhaps you'll make a point that I haven't heard in the 15 long years I have been talking about this. Hey guys, this is Jay.
So does it seem normal?
Well, for me, it depends, because even though she considered to be dependent and she's their political figure, if there's war, if there's anything going on, if there's famine, does the Great Britain then help to sustain them? Do they give them their army to use, or do they have to come up with all this stuff on their own?
Which makes sense, because they're in power.
That's why it benefits them to still be under that monarchy's rule, because with that comes the protection. So now we got Bermuda and whatever the other colored island is. Anytime people of color assume or set out to assume or pursuit of their independence from a ruling nation is frowned upon. So this is not going to end well for those islands of color. They're going to have an issue with that.
The whole Caribbean is either ran by Europeans, either the British,
all those countries that was named are part of the United Nations. All of those countries are part of the United Nations. Britain they don't have control, but they can consolidate all those countries in, because they're part of the United Nations. They all look out for each other. If war comes, they all gonna look out for each other and support one another. That's what the whole thing is about.
Well, don't forget about the most important factor. Their cousins across the pond, their little cousin, known to the world as America. We also, any battle that they take up, we're right there alongside. So that's why
you're part of the United Nations. That's why they started the United Nations. So, it'll keep each country in check, right? And for those who is not a part of the United Nations, then you have several other countries, like take for instance, Russia and China. I don't think they're part of the United Nations, right?
Yeah.
So those two countries, like collaborating and stuff like that, but the rest of the part of the world are all collaborating as one. You have three countries in the world that are separated from the United Nations. That's Russia, China, and North Korea. And all three of those countries are buddies with each other. They trade.
Their political status is like communism.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And that's not the same. That's not with. So England, British against that. They're against that.
Yeah.
They oppose that. They're not with all that. But again, to answer Gregory's initial question, do you think that a monarchy should be able to rule lands that they're not of? Again,
No.
Just look at history. It's already a proven fact they've done it, and they've done it well, and they've done it under people's opposing arguments, their perspective. The person, he or she who is sitting in the position of authority, they can care less what the minority has to think. They don't care. It's like I'm up here in this position of power. You're gonna do as you're told, otherwise you will be beaten into submission. So to answer that question, should they rule? If they can, they will.
In reality, right, there's 26 monarchies in the world. A fascinating network of kings and queens and sultans, emperors, emirs. They ruled and they reigned over 43 countries. 43 countries, my fault, excuse me. And here's some pros and cons on a monarchy. A pro, popular in the public. A con, it costs the taxpayers. A pro, it boosts national unity. Con, no place for equality society. Pro, soft power profits for the UK. Con, I don't know how that's a pro. Con is undemocratic. Here's some facts. It reduces partisanship and creates a sense of unity. A monarchical system of government eliminates the need for different parties focusing on different ideologies. It has fast decision making, increases government savings, smooth transitions of power. It has trained leaders, a stable balance of government. Here's some more information on kings, queens, and ruling monarchies. Roll clip 2, B.
With the King of Spain recently abdicating and handing the throne over to his son, we thought it would be a good time to look into our world's real-life Game of Thrones. I, for one, have a bunch of questions. First off, Spain has a king? Who knew? How many other nations have kings? 10? 12? No, way more. 45 nations have monarchs. 45 nations! But don't get too excited. 16 of those, including the UK, are Commonwealth realms like Canada or Australia that recognize Queen Elizabeth II of England as their monarch. So there actually aren't that many people who could be considered kings or queens or emirs or sultans or whatever. We're just going to say kings to make this simple. In total, there are 30. The vast majority are part of constitutional monarchies and largely act as ceremonial figureheads. But who cares about them, right? Where are real Game of Thrones style kings? The ones with absolute power and blood rights to the throne. You win or you die. Well, Saudi Arabia's king has almost absolute power. He has to follow Sharia law and take advice from a council of other family members. Plus, the line of succession doesn't necessarily go from the father to the son. The royal family as a whole can decide to pass over someone if there's a better fit waiting in the wings. The king of Swaziland technically has absolute power, but he also has to manage an elaborate parliamentary system, which is partially elected and partially assigned by himself. Plus, there is a co-king of sorts who handles spiritual aspects of his reign. But it looks like that person has little to no power. Bahrain claims to be a constitutional monarchy, but from what we can tell, Bahrain's king has absolute power and is committing a ton of human rights violations. Not cool, Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa. Not cool. The United Arab Emirates is led by a federal Supreme Council of 7 emirs, but the presidency of the council is inherited, and from what we can tell, he has almost absolute power, making them more of a hereditary monarchy in the traditional sense than a council. The Sultan of Brunei has absolute power and is a king in the I rule everything and can do whatever I want Game of Thrones type of way. So is the Sultan of Oman and the Emir of Qatar. All 3 nations have parliaments or councils that do some advising, but they're totally controlled by the king. The king has absolute power, and when the king dies, his next of kin will take over. There is one final king with absolute power, though, the Pope. He is technically the monarch of Vatican City, which is its own nation. He can, by decree, do whatever he wants. But when we say Game of Thrones type king, we don't mean the Pope. Plus, the Pope can't even have kids, so the heredity thing is out the window. If you'd like to learn more fun stuff, check out our video on what the true meaning of the word jihad is. The answer is much more positive than you might think.
Does it even mean holy war at all? Well, the short answer.
How do we feel about that? Anybody want to jump in on a video?
Again, I feel like that here in America, we don't have to deal with stuff like that. But I think that there are some members of the political system that wish they had that kind of sustainability where they could remain in office like the Queen did throughout her lifetime. For example, if the Donald could have been elected king, he would be, you know, king for life. You know,
why do you think there's so many more kings than queens?
Because of the system where men value men's opinion and their position more than women. This is why I said Queen Elizabeth was respected, because amongst all those men, she was the queen that was recognizable for a long time. I think that in her passing, that even though now known as King Charles, I think they're gonna question his authority, because his mom was such a, you know, like a rigid you know, example where I don't believe they questioned her. They didn't question her openly in public and stuff like that. And if they did, I think she probably handled it different. You know what? Better yet, Kiana, did you just tune in? Kiana?
Yes, I did.
Gregory, I think you should ask Duchess about you know, that, see how she feels about it. See, she is the ruling figure in the land of Kiana. So ask her how she feels about it.
Oh, how do you feel about it being more kings than queens?
More patriarchy. That's I don't like it, but we know why that is, because it's a patriarchal system. Most of the world is that way. Just like,
I think the men are intimidated by us women because we run things better, we do things better.
Lady, you don't want to jump in there?
I was gonna say that as well, and most of the time, wars are created by men. Most women know we don't have these wars, so I would be curious to find out how that dynamic is with kings versus queens running these monarchies.
Yeah, I think it's a little something more sinister behind all of it.
Yeah,
because you get deeper into it.
Because it's the same as a woman becoming the president in America. They don't want that either.
Oh
No.
no, they
So,
rather a
so, so,
madman who's trying to kill everybody than have a
Right.
woman man.
Mm.
And
yeah,
then they say
but
women
see,
are
that's not
emotional and will be going to war over our emotions.
right.
Ah,
But that's not.
Well,
I,
the former president put that to dead. So I don't believe that. I mean, I never believed that in the first place. But if he was if he was the person to make that scale a little more level, I believe that the former president.
I think that based upon the men with some exclusions, yeah, a lot of the presidents of any land have been very emotional. I think even more so than what they claim women are in some cases. I mean, some of these men, I think they might be undergoing some type of menopausal issues
Well,
because
tell me what's the deal
Menopause.
with Donald Trump? He's got the FBI going after people who disagree with him, who talked about him. He's acting like a little school kid.
well, I'm gonna say something, and you guys try to follow me. It says a lot about a man that doesn't respect the female anatomy to begin with, where he says just grab him by the coochie. Someone that spent his whole life trying to get back into coochie head first. So that should tell you a lot about that individual. And that I'm trying to be as coy and as respectful about it. But you guys are all intelligent adults. So if you know my sense of humor, just follow it. And if you don't know it, just laugh now and figure it out later. So that explains about Donald Trump.
So you know that Britain ruled almost most of the world, right? So it goes without showing that most kings and queens and monarchies, they're not as popular as the Windsors.
I think because again, who they represent, how they carry themselves, the Windsor family, that bloodline. I think that a lot of things pertaining to us, them and their kingdom played out in public's eye. Whereas a lot of these other ones, you got dynasties and stuff like that. It was more maniacal and it was violent. So who wants to report on violence other than someone else that plans to rule by example? But in this situation, again, I just feel like that Queen Elizabeth, for her throughout her duration, she showed such poise. So you couldn't help but respect her. She was a queen amongst kings. Some kings in some situations would have never been king or should have been king if it wasn't for their bloodline. That was the only thing that made them acceptable, to be king. Solely their what's the name? Their bloodline. She upstaged a lot of them, I think.
Very true. That's exactly what I was about to get into. Here's a Google fact. Considering the British royal family can be traced back to the 9th century, that's 1,209 years ago, in 37 generations. The Windsors have a good deal of confirmed ancestry, right? 6 of the current European monarchs, the monarch of Belgium, Denmark, Luxembourg, Norway, Spain, the United Kingdom, are descendants of King Christian IV of Denmark and Princess Louise. So in other words, they're all related. How do we feel about that? They're all second, third, fourth cousins. How do we feel about that?
Again, they married well, so they can maintain that position of authority. So it was going to be passed down from generation to generation in some shape or form. They would be a part of the ruling party. So it's
Well,
not by chance.
actually, they married their cousins and stuff because they wanted it to stay in the royal blood. And back then, it wasn't much of that. So they would marry an offspring to make sure that the family stay in royal. Because you know you're not supposed to marry outside of the royal.
Yeah.
No,
That's why Elizabeth's father's brother was dethroned because he married an American. He would have been king and not Elizabeth's father, but because he married an American woman, he couldn't take that place.
yeah,
He
but he
married a
was two
divorced.
times married.
Yeah,
She was divorced. That's the
as
reason
well.
why he couldn't marry her
Yeah,
and be
was divorced.
king.
And
Now that,
Prince Charles, right back then, they didn't even want him to marry Camilla.
yes, but see, when they did that, it was because of most of them they give up their royalty. Like you see with Prince Harry did, he gave up his royal duties, you know, to live so he don't have to be doing the the traveling back and forth and stuff like that, to
So
going through
he gave up his
um
duties to protect his wife because they was being
yes,
racist.
because the queen was
I was
pregnant.
waiting
She was
for
pregnant.
one of you women to say that.
Yeah, she was definitely pregnant.
I
But
think
they
that
try to see what do people do who are prejudiced. They always try to make it look like the person who's telling the story about what they're doing is lying on them. If they're making up stuff, we would have gave them all the help they needed if they had to just act and all this bull.
I
You
think it was
know,
I think it's the institution of authority, power
It's the firm.
that was prejudiced towards the union of that interracial thing. And let's remember, she and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but she's not a woman of royal blood.
No, she's a commoner.
Depending
She's an actress. She was an actress.
and she's also
She's
a common,
biracial.
and she's
Yes, and
also
she's
a woman of
biracial.
she's also a woman of color, right?
She's
yeah,
biracial. Her
Yeah,
mother.
her
definitely
mother's
woman of
black
color.
and her father's white.
And
Right.
that alone uh excludes her for anything that she would have what does she most resemble? Does she resemble more of a woman of color or a white woman?
She's
She.
like our friend.
I mean,
a
she
light
favors more
Like our
of a
mulatto,
white member, white to light
mulatto.
skin. But
yeah,
I mean, her mother is dark skin and has dreads, so she's
There you
the
go.
opposite of her mother.
Guilty by association, because her mama don't represent the regal status and profile. So her daughter is guilty by association. Was her father a member of the
No,
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 but
no, he wasn't nice.
her father's side of the family is what made her look bad. Like they did all types of things, said all types of stuff, sold stories to the media. Like they made her look bad, not her mother's side of the family.
So this is one of them situations where we're always guilty, people of color guilty of acting like that. But this case it was the poor white trash that showed their head in that situation and tainted her name. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that's what y'all saying, right?
Yeah, they did.
All right.
Well, see, I think they was jealous because she done landed her a nice dude. He's royalty and all that. So they started, people
That was bad. They
that don't
wasn't invited to the
understand
wedding.
things. They always trying to start some type of situation before they even know the person. They already judging them, and then they're trying to create conflict. So that draws a divide between the couples themselves. You know.
Yeah, it's one of that. So they probably don't phrase it like that, like this. What I'm about to say, but what's understood does not need to be said.
Yeah,
Is one
these
of the
people ain't
situations.
good people. In other
If
words,
if you not one of us, you shall be shunned by us, and that's what it amounts to basically.
Mm-hmm.
so do y'all feel like they didn't ever affect America with their colonization and their ruling of the world?
Hell yeah, they're a
Well,
big part of our development because remember our
nah.
forefathers, our forefathers, their origin is that. Remember, those what the American government and colonization was made up, the ruling parties here in the Americas was made up of exile people that was exiled from those lands due to the fact they was
Peasants.
rapists, murderers, thieves, prostitutes. That's what our ruling party was made up of.
Yep,
The
very true.
outcasts.
So sometime along the line, the British compromised the colony territories of the English Empire, which after the 1707 union of the Kingdom of England with the Kingdom of Scotland to form the Kingdom of the Great Britain, and they became the British Empire in the Americas from 1607 to 1783. Google fact. On
Nah.
February 7th, 1649, the office of king was formally abolished. The civil wars were essentially confrontations between the monarchy and the parliament. Basically,
Mm.
so when we were getting our Declaration of Independence, going through the tax acts and all that crazy stuff, we were the parliament fighting with the monarchy at this
Mm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Now,
you mean to
check
tell
this
me?
out. Check this out. Check this out. Right. All of y'all who I'm talking about, Kiana, Dave, Maria, Bird, all y'all on Saturdays. Remember the little House of Rock? They was
Yep.
teaching you all that stuff about I'm just a bill, about telling you about the Tea Party and how they dumped the tea into the harbor and all that. They was going through the history, letting you know, but they was doing it in a comical way, and they was singing it to us. And so, when you start talking about that stuff, I think of that damn cartoon all those years, and I followed it because you know they were speaking some truth in that cartoon.
You know,
That's dope because I think
history.
with that cartoon, it might have been like programming a little bit because they
Yep.
was taking away the whips and the nooses and they were giving you the bills, and it's
They
a
was
different
making
way to
it
rule
more.
in authority.
It was more tasteful to the palate. At that situation, it became more. You could digest it better. They watered it down. But I would say this: history is a beautiful thing because it's
Yeah.
like through social studies and stuff like that. You're
You can't learn without written
you become
history.
educated. You become
Yes,
educated.
you can't learn.
Even with Gregory giving that Google fact about the parliament and the monarchy feuding, and that's what brought about America's independence. See, it may have slipped my mind that they're used to because Gregory,
I
correct me if
think we
I'm
need to
wrong.
touch the Declaration of Independence too one time because I don't know if we really declared our independence from England
We
at
need
that.
to talk about that and democracy.
But okay, so let me just say this. So what I was, Gregory, you were saying that, did I hear you right? You said there was once a king here in the Americas, but it was abolished at a certain point?
The British were coming. They were ruling over us. They still
But there
felt
was
like
a,
we were their royal subjects.
because we
Right.
was. We were. Because again, that's where we stem from. That's why they refer to us, as when they say that our cousins across the pond, because we're related.
Well, check this out. Here's a little history on the royal family. It's another Google fact. The current royal family line emerged from a Norman invasion in 1066 when William the Conqueror landed in England. He deposed of the monarchy at the time, dismantling the House of Wessex. How do we feel about conquering nations? Because this is their history. This is where they're coming from. They're conquering stuff.
Well, see, here's the thing with that, right? Each because if each country who invade the country, they help build the culture. That's why you got so many cultures that
Well,
blend
I
in.
think that I disagree with that, Uncle T, because I feel like whatever culture was there, they burnt it down or they got rid of your books
Yeah,
and knowledge.
but what I'm saying is
Sacred temples,
you
they
can
ruined them.
the culture is blended because they using stuff from that country, also the ingredients from their own country, which is also helping to spread that out to that country that conquered them, because they using the same ingredients that the countries that they conquered from, right?
You guys,
So
you guys
that's
got to
why I
remember,
said
this has been going on since the beginning of time. You have nations, tribes that fight wars, and at the conclusion of the war, the victor, again, as I stated earlier, they benefit from the spoils. So that means whatever treasures, whatever gold, whatever splendor of your land, now belongs to me, including the people of that land, and I will do with them as I choose to. That's a part of the history. That's a part of the that's the nature of the beast.
Mm-hmm.
How you feel about that, Patsy?
Yeah, I feel like, a lot of the world is basically the same. It's like men want to rule over the world, and they essentially, it's like no matter where you live, men look at women as like second class citizens or less than what their worth is. So like we're not worthy of saying our voice. We're not worthy of being heard and everything. So yeah, it's like that's why they feel like the monarchies feel like they can do what they want to do and take advantage of the spoils in the land, and that's including the women. So yeah.
Yeah, I think they did that too to mix the seeds and just mix DNA. I think it's a deeper thing there going on too.
But don't we have something like that playing out right before our eyes right now, currently, with the with Ukraine and what's that, Russia?
Yep.
See, they're battling, for independence or trying to win back something that they feel like belongs to them because they once conquered them and they felt like they're part of what their power structure represented. So now Russia has been trying to reassume their position of authority for quite a long time, for decades now. It's just more they're more voiceful, more visible about what they've been doing. But what is it, the Iron Curtain, the Soviet Union and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy, y'all. Do y'all know that the current royal family is really German?
I wouldn't be surprised at anything, because again, people have traveled the world, and their authority and their wealth followed them wherever they went. And if they had enough influence, they could overtake other like empires. It was welcomed in, and once they got in, they started working their wonders.
And I think you put it real well, Uncle D, what you were saying about the conquering. I got a clip here on people that have been conquered and they're actually involved in the royal families ruling right now. Here's my last clip. I want you guys to watch this one and pay attention.
Royal tours are a key part of the job for members of the royal family. They can be full of energy, flag waving and photo opportunities. In recent times, though, there have been some awkward moments. And for some, they have been a reminder of the monarchy's difficult imperial past.
Slavery was abhorrent, and it should never have happened.
As of June 2022, the British Crown was still legally head of state in these 15 countries, all former British colonies or protectorates. But increasingly, there have been calls for the British monarch to be removed as head of state.
Ladies and gentlemen, their Royal Highnesses, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, have arrived. Please stand.
They shouldn't be welcomed as leaders of the country, as representatives of the head of state. How these two young white people now going to be here saying we are going to kowtow to them and we are going to bend and bow and kneel to them. Those days are done. The monarchy is a relic.
In the Caribbean, some people want the royal family to provide reparations for their role in slavery. So what exactly are the monarchy's links to the slave trade?
Meta Portal with Smart Sound helps reduce your background noise.
The royal family's links to slavery began during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. The crown and the royal family was deeply involved in the slave trade and making money off the slave trade. Charles II granted a charter to the Royal Adventurers originally, and they were then reconstituted as the Royal African Company to deal directly in enslaved Africans and to sell them in the New World, but primarily to the colonies in the Caribbean and mainland North America.
This was one of the greatest atrocities in human history. And those who suffered in this atrocity are persons from the region, a lot of persons from the Caribbean region. And that suffering was not only immense, it was generational. And a lot of wealth was derived from the suffering, a lot of benefits was derived from the suffering.
The brands that were used on the bodies of enslaved people featured the name of monarchs. So for example, the Duke of York, one of the brands that was used by the Royal African Company with the letters DY, and this was actually instructed to be put onto the bodies of enslaved people. So they are making it very clear that the royal family is involved, that the royal family supports the slave trade, and that actually because the royal family supports it, this is a good investment. This is a safe investment. This was seen as the way to build an empire, but also as a way to convert Africans to Christianity. That was the primary argument that was made at the time. So the crown saw itself as a civilizing, Christianizing force. That yes, they were profiting, and yes, they were supplying laborers to the colonies, but they also saw themselves as on the right side because they were expanding and civilizing the world.
The wise African chiefs have seen the tremendous changes in Nairobi to which the princess herself referred in her speech.
The contrast we see today is a striking tribute to the men and women of all races who have made it a great center of commerce and finance, the crossroads of East Africa, the capital of your colony, and the seat of the East Africa High Commission.
So, of course, that family has benefited from enslavement, and so has many institutions in this country, whether it's the railways, the roads, the banks, HSBC, Barclays. And the enslavers were compensated when slavery was ended, and the compensation didn't stop getting paid until 2015. So people like me were paying actually for compensation for the enslavers. But the people who were enslaved were never compensated. We never even got an apology.
By the 1790s, there's a growing groundswell of support for abolition in Britain. But the royal family is deeply opposed to the abolition of the slave trade. George III did not come out publicly and say that he was against the slave trade, but he made it very clear to his ministers that he would not support abolition as a cabinet measure. So this was something that the public knew, that the royal family was against abolition, that the royal family believed that the slave trade was crucial to maintaining Britain's wealth and power and its imperial interests.
Repairing that damage is something that both Prince Charles and Prince William have tried to do in recent years, with some of the strongest words yet from members of the royal family when it comes to links to slavery, and some have seen it as a real shift in attitudes.
From the darkest days of our past and the appalling...
There you go.
All right, how does everybody feel about the last clip?
I want to express my profound sorrow. Slavery was abhorrent, and it should never have happened.
Expressing sorrow, but not saying sorry. And there's been so much discussion in Jamaica, where they've just come from, about an apology for slavery. How are you feeling about that debate here?
Slavery? Well, we're now independent. We're now given freedom. Okay, so slavery to me, it's been abolished. So why go back in time, and move forward?
That it wasn't him. It was back on. Yeah.
Give it. That was the past. We're moving forward right now.
Yes.
All is making the Bahamas a better place.
Yes.
And that's the best thing we can do.
Yes, that's all.
Yeah.
Not that we are prepared to forget. Yeah. We'll never forget. And we will always remember our history, we will always teach it. But it actually helps us to appreciate where we're going and to know where we are going.
In Canada, the anger that's been directed at the royal family has all been to do with the treatment of Indigenous people while the country was still part of the British Empire.
Metaportal Go. Look professional.
In 2021, statues of both Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth II were toppled on Canada Day. It followed the shocking discovery of unmarked graves at school sites, where Indigenous children had been forcibly taken from their families during the reign of Queen Victoria.
My parents, my grandparents, my aunt, uncles, and a bunch of them, they all went to residential schools.
It's still scarred the community.
They're still scarred, so it happened to our parents and grandparents, but it's still affecting us.
Indigenous communities in Australia and New Zealand have also taken issue with the royal family. Always will be Aboriginal land. Indigenous Australians say that Britain never acknowledged that Australia was owned by Aboriginal people before it was colonised by the British in 1788.
The colonisation of both countries included violence, it included disease and dispossession, and it certainly included massacre. There's a whole range of things that happened to Aboriginal people. A number of communities, and in fact I would suggest most, were impacted quite profoundly by having their culture either denied to them or their language denied to them.
In New Zealand, Indigenous people have protested the Treaty of Waitangi, a founding agreement between the British Crown and a number of Maori chiefs. The agreement contained protections and land rights for Maori people that were never honoured. In 1995, the Queen delivered an apology from the British Crown to New Zealand's biggest Maori tribe for the seizure of Maori lands by British colonisers.
Kia mau tina taonga. A tuputa.
And in 2005, a topless protester wrote, "Get your colonial shame off my breasts," as Prince Charles toured the country. In recent times, the Crown has sought to distance itself from colonialism and racial prejudice.
May I just say that while I'm here with my husband as a member of the royal family, I want you to know that for me, I am here with you as a mother, as a wife, as a woman of color, and as your sister.
The one time someone from outside, the descendant of enslaved people, married into the royal family, she was not treated well and alleged that she had been, horribly treated, and ended up fleeing the royal family and is no longer an active royal.
The royal family a racist family, sir? We're very much not a racist family.
The image of the monarchy in some ways is more important than anything, and by all respects they have failed, especially recently with the treatment of Meghan Markle, the royal tours, the backlash against the crown. None of it is good, and none of it bodes well for the survival of this institution, especially among the younger generations.
And the Meghan Markle case is really interesting because she's a light-skinned, mixed-race woman. She's almost white passing to a certain extent. She's much lighter than me. So she has certain privileges that dark-skinned black women probably wouldn't have. Yet she was still attacked by the mainstream media, by the social media trolls, by commentators, by people inside the royal family. So that showed a spotlight on this country that we're not as progressive as we think we are, that we still have an issue with race in this country. And I think a lot of the time we think the race issue is something that's just focused on America, which is why the uprising in 2020, I think, caught a lot of people off guard, because they're like, oh, racism just happens in America, it's just George Floyd. But we never want to look at the racism that actually is taking place in this country.
The royals still have a lot of support overseas, but in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement, there has been a shift. And we could now see countries following in the footsteps of Barbados by removing the British monarch as head of state.
There is really no support for maintaining some of these colonial ties in the 21st century. Once the Queen is gone, there are already many colonies, former colonies, leaving now while the Queen is still alive. And I think that is really the most sobering aspect of this, that Barbados has already left, Jamaica is signaling that it will leave. If these former colonies are already now trying to sever ties and become truly independent, what is to stop other members of the Commonwealth?
Is that okay for you? Like having the one family royalty where it's they're given all the wealth, all of the. That's not okay for us. So.
As a black person, I just can't relate to an institution that was been founded on colonialism, imperialism, and enslavement of my ancestors. Their imagery has been used as propaganda because they are the new faces of colonialism. They are the new faces of imperialism. They are the new faces of social hierarchy and class. And I think a lot of people are buying into that without actually analysing what these new generations of royal family actually represent.
They are the figurehead for the colonial process, but they are not the people that did the colonialism. I belong to the Indigenous community, and many people that I know are very supportive of the monarchy, and many would prefer that we were a republic. We shouldn't really anticipate that there would be a homogenous Aboriginal view of any event, and particularly something as important as, say, becoming a republic.
A republic.
You think it's time to become a republic?
I think it's time to become a republic, right? So just let go of the slavery, let go of the Queen. Just focus on set a goal and a direction.
Okay, now that we got to the end of the clip, can I get everybody's opinion one by one, how they feel about the royal family? Uncle D, you want to start?
Yeah. So based upon that video, and the royal family, just like most families and positions of power, I think that people of the ruling party do not fear the tyranny until the tyranny comes to their doorsteps. So when in that video early on, when they was talking about the royal family putting their stamp of approval on the slave trade and stuff like that, that is not surprising to me because most people of fortune.
Hold on. I think they said they was branding slaves with their names.
That's what I mean to put. That's what I mean by placing their stamp of approval. Literally, figuratively, and literally speaking, they made sure everybody's gonna know we support this movement. So again, I don't think people fear that level of tyranny until it dawns their doorsteps. So when you got people of Canada talking about how they was being mistreated and stuff like that, since the beginning of the time, again, we go back to the tribes and stuff like that, you were treated a certain way by the ruling party. If you was enslaved, you was not getting no good treatment. I don't think there's any slaves of any time on any continent that could tell you, oh, my slave owner was a godly individual and they made sure that I had everything that they had. No, you was considered to be beneath them, and that's how they treated you, and they wanted everybody to know that you was their property. So
right, I think that's why they're trying to turn the monarchy into a relic, like it's a thing of the past. We shouldn't even recognize these people as royalty.
I say good luck with that because this is an established symbol of authority. These other like countries that want to become independent of them now. Hence what I said to you at the beginning. I feel like that once now that the queen is dead, the people are not going to respect what the Windsor family once was. I feel like they're going to question Charles's rulings. I dare say they wouldn't come up against the queen because she was long established. They already knew what came before her and they feared, angering her. But again, this is a new world that is governed by the old world. But what's happening is you see an uprising of the younger generation. And the younger generation are just as rigid as the powers that be. They feel like they have a voice and they know how to use it. So such a thing as strength in numbers. And when it's time and they need to be seen and heard, oh, they do. They show up and they show out. So there may or may not be some changes. I don't think they'll be in the near future, but I say they're gonna have a task of trying to switch around something that's been of long standing. I just feel like the Windsor family, the monarchy will always be the head of state. And I think that all of those ones that are under them, that now want their independence, I say it again, I think they're only doing that, and the ones that already established that, I don't know if they're just doing it because they can. I think that they're being allowed to. Because we gotta remember, even going back to Meghan, there's a reason why you guys basically denounced the royal blood, the royal heritage, is because they didn't want you want that representation in the first place. So they're not losing no sleep that Prince Henry, I think that's his name, and his wife decided that they're not. Is it Harry or Henry?
Harry,
has declared that he like he's basically denounced his standings or his duties. He doesn't care about that. But I want you guys to all peek something. Anybody that might have prejudice towards that union, it was brought to my attention that when Meghan showed up to the funeral, she was wearing a dress that was reminiscent of the Queen. So I think that's a symbol of respect on her part too. She acknowledged that what's the name, that Queen's authority, and it's almost to say, you know, imitation is the highest form of flattery.
Tanya, would you like to comment on how you feel about the royal family?
I'm gonna talk about Meghan and Harry first, because he left the monarchy because of the way that they was treating his wife, with the racism and the little jokes within the family and the press, and the family not protecting her from the press like they do every other family member. And they're standing in the funeral. Everything is the way the Queen wanted it. She arranged all of that down to the millisecond, where she wanted people to stand, what route they wanted to take. She helped to design the hearse. So everything that went on with that is the way that she wanted it to be. Now, speaking on France's history, Great Britain's history, them being involved in the slave trade, the outliers that were sent over here to help begin the United States took a lot of what they did in France and brought it here, because they made their money and they got wealthy off the slave trade.
Very true.
Those people came here and did the same thing, just like
Our stories aren't that much
the
different.
minorities over there helped build Great Britain. Minorities over here help build the United States. And they don't want to give us our props because they think that they're up here and we're down here. Now, today's society, the modern monarchy is authoritarianism. And that's where these people, I'm going to say these people, these Republicans, want to take the United States. And that's what I got to say about that.
Uncle Rob, you want to give your closing thoughts on the royal family?
No, I really don't have anything to say about that family. I'm gonna let her rest.
Patsy?
I agree with a lot of people, what people already been saying, you know, it's like authoritative and, you know, it's good to look up to them, but it's like you have to look at what they've done in the past and how they really are underlining racist thoughts and stuff, even though it's not too much publicized, but it's still there. Yeah, that's what I think, you know.
So do you think that we should turn them into a relic instead of them being an active monarchy?
No, I don't think we should turn them into a relic. You know, there's still like a line of like ruling over a country, you know, and that's how it is, how they're conducting the British country. So yeah, it's like it shouldn't be a relic. It's like trying to say because Donald Trump did what he did, we should be a relic. So I don't think it should be not Britain should we should treat them as a relic. You know, the royal family. Yeah.
All right, Auntie, you want to give your closing thoughts on the royal family after that video? I don't know. I was about to say, Uncle T, would you like to give your closing thoughts? You gotta unmute your microphone if.
And Gregory, you have some other people that joined in. I believe there's someone named Lady Lovely.
How you doing tonight, Lady Lovely? I don't know exactly who it is.
That's Momo.
What's
Hi,
up,
how
Mo?
you doing tonight? Can you hear me?
You want to give your thoughts on the royal family?
I just feel like that she was a very regal lady and that she set a lot of things in place politically. Um, when it comes down to the different countries, I wasn't able to speak earlier because no one could hear me. But when it comes down to the different countries, you know, she set in place, even though that we had ownership of those countries, that we were letting those countries flourish. Well, she was letting those countries flourish. You know, she said she took a back place. Also, she set in place parliament where she also took a back place. You know, that she stepped down the rule of the royal family. You know, so that's why a lot of people like looked up to her because the royal family, when they was in ownership of the different kingdoms and stuff, they had a lot of a lot of like say so, you know, with parliament and her giving back those countries, you know. I feel like, you know, that's why people look up to her, you know, and also setting up the United Nations. And the United Nations didn't exist before her, honestly.
That's right.
That was set in place within her time. So, like, my grandmother always looked up to her, you know, even though she wasn't the queen of America, Americans always looked up to her. So I hope
Well,
that we
they
could
were
take that
imposing
going
that they
forward.
were the queen of America too. They were imposing that, Mo.
Yeah, she was the
Yeah,
queen.
because
We
that
talked
was a
about the
chosen
tax
queen, a
acts and
chosen
the
queen.
Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
Go,
I didn't hear that. I logged off for a while.
Nah, I'm hip.
So.
I'm hip. I was gonna say,
so
so how do you feel about her conquering nations for over 1,000 years
She
and ruling?
wasn't alive for 1,000 years.
I mean, you
Britain
know what I
itself,
mean, but the family, the
yes,
monarchy. Excuse me, I didn't mean to say it like that.
the monarchy conquering for over 1,000 years. Mind you, that's when men was in place. I was trying to say, sorry, one moment. There's a train going by. But yeah, I was trying to say that sometimes when a woman step in place, it's needed from a woman's touch, a woman's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
There's that motherly love, that motherly touch. Some people say a woman is weak. Sometimes a woman is needed. You get me? Because
All right,
a
here's
man
another
know how to
question,
handle a
Miss.
war, but a
How do you
woman know
feel
how
about
to
it
bring
being
peace.
more kings than queens, then?
More kings than queens. That's just the human nature. That's how it was set up. But going forward, I hope that other countries open up the door for there to be other women in power.
Yes, ma'am.
You get me? Because she was the highest woman in power. That's why people praise her. That's the highest woman. That's a queen. You get me? But then she was stepped down. She allowed her country to step down. No man would have done that for their country to step down. You know, no woman could have gathered so many nations to come together in war. So when you come against a small country, you're coming against the United Nations. You get me? That's what people know. So when now in current political stance, when you see Russia and China coming together, like in the biblical stance, when you see the dragon and freaking Russia, well, people always say, I can't remember what they,
the bear,
you know,
the bear.
say, but the bear and the dragon. You get me? That's in biblical. If you don't believe biblical, you know, you see what these are the two powerful forces, but the United Nations come into play. Like if the Nations start going to civil unrest, man, listen, during this time, man, Russia will expand on their land. You don't want you don't want other countries to start expanding on land. You don't want that. We don't even know. We wouldn't even know how to fathom for our country to start people to invade our country and try to conquer. We wouldn't even know how to fathom.
So basically,
Like,
my last clip was about the royal family and how they got all their riches off of basically colonizing people. The
but that
things
was
you were
the
just
time.
talking about them conquering the land and stuff.
That was the time. That was the time. That was the era. And I hope that, like, you know, a lot of, you know, people, Black people, people of minority, people of color, don't forget their history. You get me? You could take the Bible with a grain of sand, a grain of salt, whichever one you choose. You get me? But listen, you can stand on whichever field you feel, but you're gonna protect your own if it come on your front. And just know, if it ever come on America's front, that's one step away from your front door. You get me? If it ever become on the United Nations front, that's one step away from America's front door. You get me? If it ever becomes a part of one of the major key factors of the United Nations, England. So that's why you gotta watch the news. At one point, I stopped watching the news. That shit was making me sad with Trump. But then I started to respect Trump because at least he's real. He's telling me what it is. You can't have him in office because he's reckless as fuck. But you get me? What we seen a black man in office. He was able to get a black person in office, a person of minority. We knew he wasn't going to be able to say what he wanted to say. You get me? It was just about getting that black person in the door, a person of color in the door, a person fighting for minorities. So people cannot not watch the news. That's what I realized. You get me? When you miss a week, you miss a lot. When you miss a month, nigga, you lost. You get me?
That's fact.
So
Gregory,
basically,
is
at the end of
Rachel?
the video, these people, they were saying that we should turn the monarchy into a relic, and we shouldn't recognize them as a royal family anymore.
What is a relic?
Like a thing of the past, like a statue or something, a memory.
That's why the queen stepped down. That was her wish. You get me? They have no say-so. Parliament have more say-so than the queen. She wrote that in Parliament. I don't know for how many years. You know how, like in America, certain laws have certain. If you don't read the fine print, you don't know how long that law is gonna last. You get me? So you just gotta pay attention. Like, I don't know.
So how much do we all think the royal family is worth?
You didn't finish getting the rest of the panels.
That's all I was about to tell them. You got
Oh,
probably
I tried.
Kiana. You got
I
Kiana,
don't think
Rachel,
Fiona's
and
on
a
here
few
anymore.
others.
Auntie, you ready to give your opinion on your last thoughts on that video? You gotta unmute your mic if you want to talk.
Well, I was where what Tanya said, like they was doing what everybody else was doing. That's how I feel about the slavery thing. But other than that, I don't have anything else to say about the family.
Uncle T, you gotta unmute your mic if you want to talk.
Is Duchess and Rachel with us still?
Rachel, would you like to give your opinion? I know you're with Mo.
Everybody, unmute your mics.
They probably can't right now.
I'm just gonna close this out with this. Here's something to think about. To rule and own places and things that aren't yours. Again, I'm your host, G. Lacey. Remember to think about it.